Okay, so you guys are starting your new unit on the Southwest. Have you guys done anything with that yet? No. Okay, well today I am presenting about the Alamo. Who knows anything about the Alamo? Yeah.
That in Texas.
It's in Texas. Who knows anything else about the Alamo? Anybody? What do you? What is it? It's not an island. No. Any more guesses? What do you think?
It's a mountain. Like it's where all the mountains.
No, not mountains.
Like hills.
Not mountains. What do you think? No, not mountains. Okay, it's alright. We'll learn about it. The Alamo is actually a building. And it was used in the Texas Revolutionary War. So today I'm going to be giving a presentation. There are a couple videos to go along with it. And as I'm going along, there is a... Have you guys used the app Socrative before on the iPads?
No.
It's where you quit. Yeah, you do. I think you have. Open up your iPads. It's where, as I go along the presentation, there will be a quiz going on your iPads. I'm not talking. That, on the backboard, it says Lang B9.
Sit down.
Type that into your room number. Look at the backboard. In green. Lang B9. And then...
Does the L have to be capitalized?
I don't know. I don't think so.
I don't think.
And then...
It's a passport.
And then it'll tell you to put in your name, and after that, don't do anything.
It doesn't say anything there. It's a quick quiz.
Did you exit out the app that I
You
just had
press
open?
join room after that.
This one.
So put your first name in. Enter your first name in.
Okay, once you're done, just place your iPad on your desk and put your hands in your lap and don't talk.
All you do is you have to type in your room number.
Then you
No.
Hey guys,
If you have a question, then raise your hand and I'll answer.
that's all you need to do.
After that, you type in your first name.
Yeah, type in your first name and your last name, and after that, just leave it. Because the first question will pop up, and you guys don't need to answer that yet because you don't know the answer yet. Yes. Yep, that's okay. Because question 1 was putting in your name. Yes.
Wait, so you can join room?
Click join room. And then put in your name. Once it says question 2, yeah, hit join room. No spaces. No spaces, no capitals. Once you get to question number 2,
It says it's not one. Wait.
L-A-N-G-E.
L-A-G-E?
Come on, guys.
Wait,
L-A-N-G-E B9.
name has to have
It doesn't matter. Just put in your name. It's just what it'll show up as when I look at who got the answers, right? We're not talking. Okay. So, as I go along with the presentation today, you guys will need to be following along because the questions on your iPads go in order of what I'm teaching. So if you fall behind, then you're not going to get any right answers. Does that make sense? So as you go along, there'll be multiple choice, and there are a couple fill-in-the-blank answers. Do you need some help, Faith?
Yeah. You have to put your number down. What was the Alamo?
Just listen.
Yep, hit submit. Is everybody on the screen where it says question 2?
No.
Yes.
Raise your hand if you're not on the screen that says question 2.
I'm not. It's not. Put your
She's on question 1.
Yeah, I'm on question.
Yeah, one was put your name in.
Please enter your name.
And then you put your name.
Enter your last name first. Last name first.
Last name first?
Last name first, I think is what it says.
No, it's first name, and I didn't put my last name.
Okay.
You only have to put your first
Please
name.
enter your last name.
Hey, we're not talking, guys.
Oh, I didn't put my last name. Please enter your last name. I already know.
As long as you're on question 2.
You go. Shh.
You
need to sit down.
Okay, I'm starting the presentation. You guys will learn all about the Alamo. Hopefully be experts by the time you're done. And don't forget, as you go along, pay attention because if your brain is off in La La Land and you miss some of the information, then you'll fall behind on questions and you won't be able to get them right. Does that make sense? And make sure to read all of the answers. Because you may think you know the answer to the question, but if you don't read all the answers, then you might not get the right one. Okay. What is the Alamo? The Alamo is a building that was built in San Antonio, Texas. And first, it was built in the 18th century for a mission church. And a mission church, it was built by the Spanish, and a mission church is used to convert local Indians to Christianity. So it's just a church that the Spanish used to try to get people to be Christians. In 1836, after being abandoned for almost 40 years, the Texan soldiers reused the building for war. Let's see over here. That's a picture of the Alamo being constructed.
I did the question.
Yeah, answer as you go along, but we're not discussing it. Just answer as you go along. The construction of the Alamo. The construction of the mission started May 8th, 1974, or 1744. I'm sorry. The Alamo, like I said, it was used as a church, and it was abandoned in 1793. And then it was not until the mid-1800s that it was repurposed for war. Yes?
What if we spell
It's okay.
The Alamo itself is not a fortress at all, but a sprawling 100-year-old Spanish mission. The Mexicans used it as a troop garrison and began the job of fortification. The Texians take on the job of shoring up its defenses. Green Jameson, a Kentucky lawyer with a talent for engineering, is in charge. The adobe of the north wall is crumbling.
So what's this video showing?
Proper materials for
When they're
repairs.
building
The shield
This is when they're
is a rough
rebuilding it.
palisade
This is in the
built with
1800s, after the church had been abandoned. This is when the Texan soldiers are going back, and they're fixing it up again because they're going to use it in the Texas Revolutionary War.
lasting symbol of this fort.
You go back.
Its walls are 4 feet thick, but it is a caved-in ruin. A ramp of earth in the nave provides access to a platform for cannon batteries. Several rooms off to each side are still roofed over and protected. Here, the defenders store several hundred pounds of precious gunpowder. The other rooms house the 14 women and children.
So you guys kind of get an idea of what the Alamo looked like? It was a church that was turned into a fort. It's the beginning of the Texas Revolution. This is when they used the Alamo as a fort in war. So in the early 1800s, Texas, before it was a state, it belonged to Mexico. In 1833, General Santa Anna became the new president of Mexico. And he was not a nice president. He was a really harsh ruler. He took away many of the rights of the people who lived in Texas. And the people who lived in Texas were not happy about that. And they decided that they wanted to separate themselves from Mexico and become their own independent state. So in October of 1835, the first battle took place at the Battle of Gonzales, and that was the first battle that started the Texas Revolution. And that's a picture of Santa Anna, who was the president of Mexico.
The popularity of the war party rose as the Mexicans became more oppressive in their rule. In 1833, Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna was elected as the new president of Mexico. In 1835, Santa Anna took away all local rights for Texans. This moved the Texans and Mexico to the brink of war. Even former peacemaker Stephen Austin echoed the call for the colonists to take up arms against Mexico. Among those who responded to the call to battle the Mexicans was legendary frontier rifleman and Tennessee Congressman Davy Crockett. On October 2nd, 1835, fighting broke out at the Battle of Gonzales, and the Texas Revolution was underway. Santa Anna began the Goliad campaign to
So that makes sense? Texas was unhappy with the way that Mexico was ruling, so they decided that they were done, that they were going to fight to become their own state. Yes.
Did it say?
It did.
See, no one is switched, they're all on.
You guys are all on question 3.
Question 6.
Well, now some may not be, but over here, no one is switched in this little section.
That was one of the very first things I said. That was one of the very first things. The name was up there. Question 3. Okay.
I want question 0.
Okay, that doesn't matter. Question 3 is the Alamo was located in what city in Texas? That was San Antonio. S-A-N. SAN space ANTONIO.
Oh, they have to type this all in.
Just this one. Just this one.
Oh, okay. San
So it's
Antonio.
S-A-N-T.
Yes.
San.
Did they say if Texas won the battle?
You just gotta pay attention. If you think that we're past it and we get to the end and you guys have an answer, then you skip it and you answer whatever questions you can.
Okay, we're still trying to get San Antonio back here. There, she's gonna write it up here. Here we go. Shh. She's trying to help everybody get caught up.
It doesn't matter if it's capitalized or
It
not.
doesn't make any
Put a
difference.
space in between.
That you do have to put.
All of these questions are word for word from the different slides on the presentation. Okay, we don't need to blurt out what question we're on and what answers we wrote.
No.
Okay? San Antonio is written on the board, so you guys have all should put that in, and I'm going to move on. So next is the Battle of the Alamo. This is when the building of the Alamo came into play during the war. So almost 200 volunteers from Texas decided that when the Mexicans were coming, they were going to occupy the building of the Alamo and use it as their fort when they were going to fight. So the Mexican soldiers showed up. They were fighting Texas. Yes.
What is the president's name again?
Move on if you don't know it.
No.
We're not there right now. This is what I'm talking about right now. Shh, no more questions. This is what I'm talking about right now. So the Battle of the Alamo lasted 13 days long, and in the end, they lost to the Mexican troops. So you're probably thinking, why is it so important? They lost, but that's a picture of the battle. But what this battle did, the Battle of the Alamo, is that it gave time for Texas to build up troops, and they actually beat Mexico in their next battle. So the Battle of the Alamo was one of the longest battles. Like I said, it lasted 13 days. It was 13 days long, and only 200 men were fighting thousands of Mexican troops. So they were kind of outnumbered. And even though they ended up losing, like this is on the board, the Battle of the Alamo saved Texas enough time to build up troops and supplies to win their next battle. And only 2 weeks after they lost the Battle of the Alamo, Texas defeated General Santa Anna, and Texas became their own independent state. So they ended up winning the whole war, even though they lost the Battle of the Alamo.
Santa Ana. I wrote Santa.
That's okay.
As the abolitionist movement
If you're
gained
missing a
strength
question,
in the
listen to this
northern
video.
United
This video
States,
tells the whole
the
story.
issue of slavery contributed to a rebellion that was brewing far to the south in Texas. At that time, Texas was still part of Mexico, but American immigrants living in the region had come to outnumber the native-born Mexicans. Many of the 25 to 30,000 Americans who had immigrated to Texas after Mexican independence from Spain came from slave states such as Tennessee and Missouri. They had created small farms, but a lot of them hoped to establish large slave plantations like those they had known in the United States. However, in Mexico, slavery had recently been declared illegal. Mexico had also refused to let any more Americans immigrate to Texas. Furthermore, back then, Mexico was controlled by a dictator named General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, who had overthrown the government and abolished the Constitution of Mexico. The American immigrants were angered at Santa Anna's actions, but they also wanted the bans on slavery and immigration lifted. By the end of 1835, the Texans had captured the city of San Antonio and had even formed their own government. General Santa Anna decided to put a halt to the rebellion in Texas and assembled a force of 5,000 troops to march on San Antonio. The arrival of the Mexican force surprised the Texans, and they rapidly withdrew behind the walls of the old Spanish mission of San Antonio de Valero, known locally as the Alamo. And it was here that a small group of men decided to fight to the bitter end. Mexican forces laid siege to the Alamo and trapped the defenders inside. And while this was happening, a group of influential Texans issued a Declaration of Independence from Mexico. A few days later, a vicious battle erupted. Mexican forces captured the Alamo and killed almost everyone inside. But even though the Texans lost the Battle of the Alamo, their struggle gave leader Sam Houston the time he needed to gather enough forces to defeat Santa Anna's army a short time later. As a result, an independent nation called the Republic of Texas was born. While Texas gained its independence, the United States held elections, and voters chose Jackson's vice president, Martin Van Buren, to be their new leader. Also that year, just to the northeast of the new Republic of Texas, a 25th state called Arkansas joined the Union as a slave state. 9 years later, the same year that Andrew Jackson died, Texas gave up its independence and was admitted to the Union as a slave state as well.
Okay, and there are my sources. So before we all start blurting out questions, I'm going to go over everything we learned and all the questions that are included in the Socrative in case you guys have any more left, okay? So, the Alamo was built in the 1700s, but it wasn't built for battle, was it? What was it first built for? Yeah, it was a missionary church. The Texans and Mexicans first used it as a missionary church. And then, about 40 years later, after it was abandoned, what happened? What did they use it for then? Yes. They rebuilt it and they used it for war. And I'm sorry if you guys struggled with the questions where you had to type in the answers, but both of them are back there on the board. San Antonio and Santa Ana. What was San Antonio? That's the city in Texas. Where it was. And Santa Ana was the cruel, harsh president of Mexico that caused Texas to say, we're done being part of Mexico, we want to be our own state. Okay? So I just answered your next question. Why did Texas want to go to war? Yes? They wanted to gain independence. Right? You guys all know the word independence means, don't you?
I do.
Okay, not the city of independence. The word independence means they wanted to be on their own. They did not want to be part of Mexico anymore.
They wanted to be independent.
They weren't trying to be part of America yet. That was not what the point of this was. They just wanted to be away from Mexico. They were done. So they wanted to gain independence. That's what that means. So next, who wants to tell me some things about the actual Battle of the Alamo? How long did it last? Yeah. Good. It lasted 13 days. For anybody who still has that question, it lasted 13 days. So, did the Texans win the Battle of the Alamo? No, they did not. Why was that? They were outnumbered. They had 200 men versus thousands of thousands of Mexican soldiers. So they didn't win. But what did they do by fighting that battle? Yeah.
They used the Alamo.
Well, yeah, they did use the Alamo, but what did they do for the Texas troops? Yeah. They bought them some time. While the Mexicans were fighting the 200 Texans at the Alamo, they did a pretty good job. They lasted 13 days there. But while they were doing that, the ruler, or the guy who's in charge of the Texas Army, he got enough time to build up supplies and army to ultimately end up defeating Mexico, right? So, in the end, what happened to Texas? They won, and then what? They gained independence. And then what happened 9 years after that?
It became a part of the United States.
Mm-hmm. That didn't happen right away. They didn't leave they didn't leave Mexico and then go straight to the United States, did they? That didn't happen. Texas was actually their own little independent kind of country for a little bit. They didn't just join the United States right away. The United States slowly became the 50 states that it was today. So Texas is by itself for a while. Question?
Didn't 200 men fight?
Mm-hmm. They were really outnumbered. It was 200 men. 200 men versus thousands. Has everybody completed their quiz and finished all of the questions?
No, I can't. No, I'm still on problem one.
Okay, no blurting. Yeah, if you're there, just wait.
Wait, did
Texas... No blurting. Raise your hand if you're stuck on question number 6. Is anybody else stuck on question number 6? Her question was, why did Texas go to war? Yeah. What was the word that I used? They wanted to gain. Yeah. Do you know what the word I used was? They wanted to gain independence from Mexico. Who else is stuck on a question? Raise your hand if you're stuck. If it's one of the typing questions, look back on the board. Who else is stuck on a question? That's okay. We can take care of that later. If you're stuck on a question. That's fine. If it says completed and it has a little circle, then just leave it. Okay, his question is, what happened after the Battle of Mexico? Or sorry, after the Battle of the Alamo, what happened? Yeah. What did they do with their next battle? They won. And then what happened after that? They gained independence. You learned a new vocab word. Is everybody done with all their questions? Okay. I'll print that out. Alright, thank you guys. You guys can close your iPads and we'll go put this away in a little bit. What are they doing next week?
We actually now, right now, we're going to be going, we're going to be getting ourselves organized to go across to the pod C to work on their PowerPoints. So, all you have to do, you're not listening, Emily, is to shut your iPad.
Could you guys please close out of the app too?
Oh, close out of the app.
So the app closes.
Make sure you've done that.
Don't shut it off. Just close out the app and close it.
Yeah, you want it? Does everyone know how to close it off and do all of that correctly? Shh. And then shut it. And I need everyone seated, and then I need, some of us are just talking away. Shh. That's a little bit why some of you had a little trouble earlier. Because you get a talking and you're not even listening to the presentation that's on the smartboard. Okay, now, and again, I still see many iPads open.
It's on student.
Some of them, yeah, having a little trouble. Okay, shh. I want you to be getting your things ready that you're going to need to go over to the lab. That means your PowerPoint information for social studies. She says you can find the Symbaloo on the classroom webpage and copy and insert pictures to help show representations of their state. And she says you should try and finish today. Now, if some of you aren't going to be able to do that, okay, but she'd like for most of us to try to finish today.
The whole thing is like pictures and everything.
And that's kind of what she wrote.
Just close out the app.
Now, are you going to collect these, or should I have them collect?
I'm sorry?
Are you going to collect these, or
Collect.
the
Oh, the